Chapter 1. The perfect setup. Rowe had always loved December. The way the city dressed itself in twinkling lights, the smell of cinnamon and pine drifting from every cafe, the soft hum of carols sneaking through shop doors. It all made him feel like life was leaning towards something good, something permanent. He stood in his apartment, staring at the Christmas tree he'd decorated 2 nights ago. It wasn't perfect. One side sagged under the weight of too many ornaments, but it was his. Their tree, really. Abby had helped him hang the first few baubles before claiming she had a work call. He didn't mind. She'd promised they'd finish together this weekend. Kyle smiled at the thought of her. Abby Winslow, 31. Sharp-witted, beautiful in that effortless way that made strangers glance twice. They'd been together almost 2 years now, and lately, their conversations had tiptoed toward the future. Houses, vacations, maybe even rings. Kyle wasn't naive. He knew relationships were fragile things. But with Abby, he felt steady, hopeful. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Abby had texted earlier, not feeling great, going to stay in with a book. You have fun with the guys. He'd sent back a quick feel better. Call if you need anything. Then grabbed his coat and headed out. The bar was warm, crowded, alive with holiday cheer. Kyle slid into a booth with his friends, laughter spilling easily between them. For a while, he forgot about the cold outside, forgot about the deadlines waiting on Monday. He even forgot about Abby, until he glanced toward the far end of the room and saw her. His breath caught. There she was, hair loose around her shoulders, wearing that green sweater he loved. And she wasn't alone. 2 men sat across from her and another woman, Abby's best friend, if he remembered right. The 4 of them were laughing, leaning in close, drinks in hand. It looked cozy, intimate, like a double date. Kyle's stomach tightened. She told him she was sick, staying home, reading. He stared for a long moment trying to make sense of it. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe this was something else. But the way one of the men smiled at Abby, like he was auditioning for her attention, made Kyle's pulse thrum in his ears. Without thinking, he pulled out his phone, snapped a photo, typed a message beneath it. So, how's the book? He hit send. Across the room, Abby's phone buzzed. She picked it up, still smiling, until she saw the screen. Kyle watched the change happen like a slow-motion car crash. Her smile faltered, then vanished. Her eyes widened, horror flooding her face. She looked up, scanning the room, and when her gaze locked on his, the blood drained from her cheeks. Kyle didn't move, didn't speak. He just slid his phone into his pocket, stood, and walked out. Behind him, his friends called after him, confused. He didn't answer. He heard the scrape of a chair, hurried footsteps, a voice, Abby's, calling his name. But by the time she burst through the door into the frosty night, he was gone. Chapter 2. Fallout. The cold night air bit at Kyle's cheeks as he strode down the street, hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. He didn't have a destination, just the urgent need to keep moving, to put distance between himself and that image burned into his mind. Abby laughing with 2 strangers, her hand brushing the rim of a wine glass like she had all the time in the world. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Once, twice, then again, rapid fire. He didn't look. He knew who it was. He turned a corner, the glow of Christmas lights blurring past him. A couple walked by, fingers intertwined, their laughter floating like music. Kyle clenched his jaw. 2 hours ago, that could have been him and Abby. 2 hours ago, he was picturing a future with her, maybe even a ring by New Year's. Now, he wasn't sure what he was picturing. The phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, thumb hovering over the screen. Abby, Kyle, please, let me explain. Abby, it's not what you think. Abby, please answer me. He stared at the words, his chest tight. Not what you think. The oldest line in the book. He shoved the phone back into his pocket and kept walking. By the time he reached his apartment, his anger had cooled into something heavier. Confusion, maybe, hurt. He dropped his keys on the counter, kicked off his boots, and sank onto the couch. The tree lights blinked cheerfully at him, oblivious to the implosion of his night. His phone lit up again. This time, a message from his friend Mark. Mark, dude, what happened? Abby looked like she saw a ghost. Kyle stared at the screen, fingers itching to type something. Anything. But what was there to say? Caught my girlfriend on a date after she lied to me? That sounded insane. Felt insane. He tossed the phone aside and leaned back, closing his eyes. Images flickered behind his eyelids. Abby's smile melting into horror, her frantic scan of the room, the way she bolted after him. If she was guilty, why chase him? If she wasn't, why lie? Kyle rubbed his temples. He didn't want to think about it anymore. Didn't want to picture her laughing with someone else. He grabbed the remote, turned on the TV, and let the noise drown out his thoughts. But even as the sound filled the room, his mind kept circling back to one question. What if the future he'd been planning was already gone? Chapter 3. Abby sighed. Abby Winslow had never felt her stomach drop so fast. 1 second, she was laughing at a joke about holiday traffic. The next, her phone lit up with a message that turned her blood to ice. So, how's the book? And beneath it, the photo. Kyle's photo. Her eyes darted across the restaurant, heart pounding. until they found him. Standing near the door, his expression unreadable. No anger, no sarcasm, just nothing. That was worse than yelling. Worse than anything. "Kyle?" she started, pushing back her chair, but he was already gone. By the time she burst outside, the street was empty except for a couple of bundled-up pedestrians and a taxi pulling away. "No, Kyle." She stood there for a moment, breath fogging in the cold, panic clawing at her chest. Then her phone buzzed again. Her best friend, Jenna, leaning in the doorway with a look that was equal parts confusion and annoyance. "Abby, what the hell was that?" Jenna asked, arms crossed. Abby swallowed hard. "Kyle, he saw us." Jenna's brows lifted, and for a split second, Abby thought she saw something flicker in her friend's eyes, something sharp, almost satisfied. But then Jenna was all sympathy. "Oh no," Jenna said, stepping closer. "That's bad. Really bad." Abby pressed a hand to her forehead. "He thinks I lied to him. Which, I mean technically I did. But, you told him you were sick," Jenna reminded her, voice soft but edged. "And now he sees you on what looks like a date. Abby, that's not a good look." "It wasn't a date," Abby snapped, then lowered her voice when a couple glanced their way. "You said you needed me here for moral support. That's the only reason I came." Jenna shrugged, her scarf catching the glow of the streetlights. "And I appreciate it. But Kyle doesn't know that. Does he?" Abby's chest tightened. Jenna was right. Kyle didn't know. And now he probably thought she was sneaking around behind his back. She pulled out her phone, thumbs flying over the screen. "Kyle, please, let me explain. It's not what you think. Send another message. Please answer me." No response. Abby bit her lip, fighting the urge to cry. She couldn't lose him. Not over this. Jenna touched her arm lightly. "Look, maybe this is, I don't know, a sign? You've been talking about the future, right? Maybe you're not ready." Abby froze. "What?" Jenna gave a little shrug, casual, like she wasn't detonating a bomb in Abby's head. "I mean, you've been with Kyle for 2 years. That's a long time. Maybe you need to ask yourself if he's really the one." Abby stared at her friend, words stuck in her throat. Jenna had never said anything like that before, never questioned her relationship. And yet, something about the way Jenna was looking at her now made Abby's skin prickle. "I need to go," Abby said abruptly, turning away. As she walked toward the subway, her phone still silent in her hand, one thought kept circling in her mind. Kyle didn't know the truth, and if she didn't fix this fast, she might lose him for good. Chapter 4. The confrontation. Kyle wasn't expecting the knock. He'd spent most of the morning nursing a headache that wasn't entirely from last night's drinks. His phone was still buzzing every hour. Texts from Abby, missed calls, but he hadn't answered any of them. He wasn't ready. When the knock came again, louder this time, he knew. He opened the door, and there she was, Abby, bundled in a cream coat, clutching 2 paper cups of coffee like peace offerings. Her eyes were wide, pleading, and for a moment, Kyle felt that familiar tug in his chest. "Kyle," she said softly, "please, can we talk?" He stepped aside without a word. Abby walked in, setting the coffees on the counter like they were fragile. The apartment smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon, but the air between them was sharp, brittle. "I owe you an explanation," she began, turning to face him. Kyle crossed his arms. "You think?" Her shoulders sagged. "I didn't mean to lie. Jenna asked me to come because she's been having trouble with dating and she wanted moral support. I thought it was just drinks. I didn't know it was a double date until I got there." Kyle's jaw tightened. "And you stayed." Abby flinched. "I didn't want to leave her hanging." She was nervous. Kyle let out a short, humorless laugh. "So you told me you were sick, staying home with a book. Meanwhile, you're out with 2 guys I've never seen before." Her voice cracked. "I panicked, okay? I didn't want you to think that you were on a date." Kyle finished for her. "Because that's exactly what it looked like." Abby's eyes shimmered, but she held his gaze. "It wasn't. I swear to you, Kyle. I love you. I would never cheat on you." Kyle stared at her, searching for something, truth, maybe, or the warmth he used to feel when she said those words. But all he found was the echo of last night, the hollow ache of doubt. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "I need space." Abby's breath hitched. "Space?" Kyle nodded, still facing the window where snowflakes drifted lazily against the glass. I need time to think." Silence stretched between them, heavy and cold. Finally, Abby whispered, "Okay." She picked up her coat, her fingers trembling. "But please, Kyle, don't shut me out completely." He didn't answer. When the door closed behind her, the apartment felt emptier than it ever had before. Chapter 5. Enter the holiday chaos. Kyle had never realized how loud his family could be until he was sitting in his apartment, staring at his phone, and listening to his mother's voicemail for the 3rd time. "Kyle, sweetheart, don't forget Christmas Eve dinner. Everyone's coming this year, your cousins, Aunt Linda, even Uncle Frank if he can stay out of trouble. Oh, and Abby, of course. We can't wait to see you both. Call me back." He ended the message and set the phone down, rubbing his temples. Abby. Of course his mother had assumed Abby would be there. She always was. Last year, they'd baked cookies together in his parents' kitchen, laughing as powdered sugar coated everything but the cookies. His mom had practically declared Abby part of the family. Now, he wasn't sure if Abby would even answer if he called. Not that he'd tried. Kyle leaned back on the couch, staring at the blinking lights on the tree. They looked cheerful, oblivious to the mess his life had become. He'd told Abby he needed space, and she'd respected that. Mostly. A few texts had trickled in, softer now, less frantic. Thinking of you. Hope you're okay. He hadn't replied. His phone buzzed again. This time, a text from his sister. Claire. Claire, Mom says you're bringing Abby. True? Kyle stared at the screen, thumb hovering. He typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, he settled on, Kyle. Not sure yet. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No reply. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Christmas Eve was 2 days away. He could cancel, but that would raise questions he wasn't ready to answer. And if Abby showed up without warning, that would be worse. The thought of her walking into his parents' house, smiling like nothing had happened, made his chest tighten. He didn't know if he could handle that. The phone buzzed again. This time, Abby. Abby, please don't shut me out completely. I know I messed up, but I want to fix this. Can we talk before Christmas? Kyle stared at the message, his heart thudding. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to believe her. But the image of her laughing with those strangers still burned in his mind. He set the phone down without replying. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent, blanketing the city in white. Kyle watched it through the window, wondering if the season that was supposed to bring joy and togetherness was about to tear everything apart. Chapter 6. The friend's next move. Abby stared at her phone, willing Kyle's name to light up the screen. Didn't. Not for hours. Not even after she sent another message, short, careful, not desperate this time. Thinking of you. Hope you're okay. Nothing. She was curled up on her couch, a blanket around her shoulders, when Jenna breezed in without knocking. Abby had given her a key months ago, back when she thought having her best friend close was a good idea. Still no word. Jenna asked, dropping her bag on the chair like she owned the place. Abby shook her head. He's not answering. Jenna made a sympathetic noise, then plopped down beside her. Well, maybe that's for the best. Abby turned, frowning. What is that supposed to mean? Jenna shrugged, pulling off her gloves. Just, you've been so stressed about this relationship. 2 years and you're still wondering if he's going to propose? Maybe Kyle's not the guy you think he is. Abby stiffened. He is. He's everything I want. Jenna tilted her head, her smile soft but her eyes sharp. Then why did he walk out without letting you explain? Sounds like someone who doesn't trust you. Abby opened her mouth, then closed it. The words tangled in her throat. Jenna leaned back, casual as ever. Look, I'm just saying, you deserve someone who's sure about you. Someone who doesn't make you beg for a conversation. Abby stared at her friend, unease prickling at her skin. Jenna had been pushing this angle since last night, and Abby couldn't shake the feeling that there was more behind it than concern. Before she could respond, Jenna's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then smiled. A slow, secret smile that made Abby's stomach knot. Who's that? Abby asked. Just someone, Jenna said lightly, tucking the phone away. Anyway, don't stress. If Kyle can't handle a little misunderstanding, maybe you should let him go. Abby didn't answer. She couldn't, because deep down, she knew Jenna wasn't just talking about misunderstandings. Jenna was trying to plant seeds, doubt, hesitation, anything to make Abby question what she felt. And for the first time, Abby wondered if her best friend wasn't really on her side at all. Meanwhile, across town, Kyle was nursing a beer at a quiet corner table. He'd agreed to meet Mark, hoping for distraction. But instead, he got Jenna. She slid into the booth like she belonged there, all smiles and holiday cheer. Kyle, fancy seeing you here, she said, shrugging off her coat. Mind if I join? Kyle blinked, thrown. Sure. Mark shot him a look that said good luck, then excused himself to grab another round. Jenna leaned in, voice low. I just wanted to say, I know Abby's been texting you. She's upset. But honestly, maybe this is a good thing. Kyle frowned. A good thing? Jenna nodded, her tone dripping with faux concern. She's been restless lately, talking about how she's not sure what she wants. I think last night was her way of exploring options. Kyle's stomach dropped. Exploring options? Jenna gave a tiny shrug, like it was nothing. I mean, she didn't exactly look miserable, did she? Kyle stared at her, anger and doubt tangling in his chest. He didn't know what to believe anymore. Chapter 7. Snowstorm surprise. Kyle hadn't planned on seeing Abby again so soon. He'd been perfectly content to spend Christmas Eve nursing his doubts at his parents' house. Maybe hiding behind his dad's eggnog and avoiding questions about, when's the wedding? But fate or maybe the weather had other plans. The snowstorm hit like a freight train. 1 minute, the roads were clear. The next, whiteout conditions swallowed everything. Kyle's family cabin, tucked in the hills 2 hours outside the city, became the only safe haven. His parents had already gone ahead, and when Kyle finally made it up the winding road, tires slipping on ice, he thought he'd earned a quiet night by the fire, until he walked in and saw Abby. She was standing by the stone fireplace, cheeks flushed from the cold, her hair tumbling out of a knit hat. For a second, Kyle forgot how to breathe. Then Jenna appeared from the kitchen, holding a mug of cocoa like she owned the place. "Surprise!" she chirped, her smile too bright. "Your mom invited us. Isn't this cozy?" Kyle stared at her, then at Abby, who looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. "Cozy," he repeated flatly. His mother bustled in before he could say more, arms full of garland. "Kyle, you made it. Isn't this wonderful? Everyone together for Christmas." Kyle forced a smile, but inside, he was screaming. By nightfall, the storm had turned the cabin into a snow globe. Wind howled outside, rattling the windows, while inside, the fire crackled and tension simmered like a pot about to boil over. Sleeping arrangements were the cherry on top. The cabin had 2 bedrooms and a loft. His parents claimed one room, leaving Kyle, Abby, and Jenna to figure out the rest. "I'll take the loft," Jenna said sweetly, shooting Abby a look Kyle didn't miss. "You two can share the guest room. Like old times." Kyle opened his mouth to protest, but his mother clapped her hands. "Perfect. Now, let's decorate the tree." And just like that, Kyle found himself stringing lights with Abby at his side, their hands brushing every so often, sending sparks he wished he could ignore. "About the other night," Abby began softly, her voice barely audible over Bing Crosby crooning from the radio. Kyle stiffened. "Not now." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't push. Instead, she reached for an ornament, a tiny glass snowflake, and hung it carefully on a branch. Kyle watched her, his chest tight. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to forget the photo, the lies, Jenna's poisonous words. But trust wasn't something you could glue back together overnight. Outside, snow piled higher against the windows. Inside, the air grew warmer, heavier, charged with something Kyle couldn't name. And he had a sinking feeling that before this storm ended, everything between them would come to a head. Chapter 8. Clearing the air. The storm had settled into a steady rhythm, snowflakes swirling like confetti outside the cabin windows. Inside, the fire glowed warm, but the tension between Kyle and Abby was anything but cozy. Kyle sat in the armchair, pretending to read a magazine while Abby and Jenna chatted in the kitchen. He wasn't listening. At least, he told himself he wasn't, until Jenna's voice drifted through, sharp and low. "I told you, Abby, you're better off without him." Kyle froze. Abby's reply was hushed, urgent. "Why are you saying that? You've been pushing this since the other night." "Because you deserve someone exciting," Jenna said, her tone dripping with faux sweetness. "Not a guy who spends his weekends watching football and talking about mortgage rates." Kyle's grip tightened on the magazine. Abby's voice rose, trembling. "Jenna, stop. He's everything I want. I love him." There was a pause. Then Jenna laughed softly. "Love? Abby, come on. You didn't look miserable sitting across from Ryan the other night." Kyle's stomach dropped. "Ryan." So Jenna had set that up. Abby's voice cracked. "You planned that, didn't you? The double date. You wanted me to, what? Cheat on him?" Another pause. Then Jenna's voice, cool and unapologetic. "I wanted you to see you have options. Kyle's safe, sure, but he's not exciting. You could do better." Kyle was on his feet before he realized it, the magazine sliding to the floor. He strode into the kitchen, his pulse pounding like sleigh bells in a storm. "Funny," he said, his voice low, controlled. "I didn't realize sabotaging someone's relationship counted as friendship." Jenna spun around, eyes wide, color draining from her face. "Kyle, save it," he snapped. "I heard enough." Abby turned too, her cheeks flushed, eyes shimmering with something between anger and relief. "Kyle," he looked at her, and for the first time in days, the fog of doubt began to clear. Abby hadn't lied because she wanted out. She'd lied because Jenna had shoved her into a situation she didn't want. Kyle's gaze shifted back to Jenna, his voice like ice. "You need to leave." Jenna opened her mouth, then closed it when she saw his expression. Without another word, she grabbed her coat and stormed out into the snow, slamming the door behind her. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Kyle turned to Abby, his chest tight. "Is that true? Everything you said?" Abby nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I love you, Kyle. I didn't want any of this. I was just trying to help her. And it blew up in my face." Kyle stepped closer, his anger melting into something softer, heavier. He reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I should have trusted you," he murmured. "I'm sorry." Abby let out a shaky laugh. "I'm sorry too." For a moment, they just stood there, the storm raging outside while something fragile and precious stitched itself back together inside. Chapter 9. The turning point. The storm had quieted overnight, leaving the world outside blanketed in white. Morning sunlight spilled through the cabin windows, catching on frost and turning everything into a glittering wonderland. Kyle stood by the door, boots on, staring out at the snow-laden pines. Behind him, the fire had burned down to embers, and the cabin smelled faintly of cocoa and pine. Abby was in the kitchen, humming softly as she poured coffee into 2 mugs. Felt normal, almost. When she walked over and handed him a cup, their fingers brushed. Kyle's chest tightened. He'd missed that. Missed her warmth, her quiet steadiness. "Thanks," he said, his voice low. Abby smiled, tentative but real. "You're welcome." For a moment, they just stood there, sipping coffee, the silence between them softer now. Then Kyle set his mug down and turned to face her fully. "I need to say this," he began, his throat tight. "I was ready to propose before all this happened." Abby's breath caught. Her eyes widened, shimmering like the snow outside. "Kyle?" He shook his head, a rueful smile tugging at his lips. "I had the whole thing planned. Christmas morning under the tree. And then," he exhaled, the memory of that photo flashing in his mind. "I let doubt get the better of me." Abby stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I love you. I've always loved you. I wasn't looking for anyone else. I was just trying to help Jenna, and I didn't see what she was doing." Kyle reached for her hand, curling his fingers around hers. "I believe you now." Her lips parted, a shaky laugh escaping. "Does that mean?" He smiled, pulling her gently toward the window. Outside, the snow sparkled under a canopy of Christmas lights his parents had strung along the porch. The world looked like a postcard, perfect, magical. Kyle brushed a strand of hair from her face, his voice soft. "It means I'm not giving up on us." Abby's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. "Good, because I'm not either." And then, under the glow of twinkling lights and the hush of falling snow, Kyle kissed her slow, deep, like every doubt had melted away. For the first time in days, everything felt right again. Chapter 10. Christmas morning. The cabin was quiet when Kyle woke, the kind of hush that only comes after a heavy snowfall. Sunlight streamed through frosted windows, painting the room in gold. For a moment, he lay still, listening to the crackle of the fire and the faint hum of carols drifting from the kitchen. Abby was there, he realized. He could hear her soft humming, the clink of mugs. Something warm settled in his chest. Last night hadn't fixed everything, but it had cracked the ice that had been freezing them apart. Kyle swung his legs out of bed and padded into the living room. Abby stood by the tree, her hair catching the glow of twinkling lights, a mug of cocoa in her hands. She turned when she heard him, and her smile, tentative, hopeful, made his breath hitch. "Merry Christmas," she said softly. "Merry Christmas," he replied, his voice rough from sleep. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the tree between them like a silent witness. Then Kyle reached under the branches and pulled out a small box, wrapped in silver paper. Abby's eyes widened. "Kyle," she whispered. He held it out, his heart thudding. "It's not what you think," he said quickly, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Not yet, anyway." She took the box, her fingers trembling as she peeled back the paper. Inside was a delicate snowflake pendant, its edges glinting like ice under the lights. Abby stared at it, tears welling in her eyes. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Kyle stepped closer, his voice low. "It's a promise that I believe in us, that I'm not walking away." Abby looked up, her smile breaking through like sunlight after a storm. "Kyle," he brushed a tear from her cheek, his thumb lingering. "I was ready to propose before all this, and I still want that, someday soon. But for now, I just want you to know I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Abby let out a shaky laugh, looping her arms around his neck. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." Kyle kissed her then, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that tasted like forgiveness and new beginnings. Outside, snow fell in lazy spirals, and inside, the cabin glowed with warmth and laughter as his parents bustled in with trays of cinnamon rolls. For the first time in days, Kyle felt the weight lift from his chest. Christmas wasn't perfect, life never was, but as Abby leaned against him, her pendant catching the light, he knew one thing for certain. This was the start of something that mattered, something worth fighting for. Chapter 11. Breaking ties. The city was still dressed in holiday sparkle when Abby stepped into the cafe, her boots crunching against a thin layer of slush. She spotted Jenna immediately, seated by the window, latte in hand, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Abby's stomach tightened. For 2 years, Jenna had been her closest friend, the person she called when work was overwhelming, when life felt too heavy. But now, all Abby could see was the woman who nearly blew up her relationship. Jenna looked up, her smile bright and practiced. "Abby, you look amazing. How was Christmas at the cabin?" "Cozy, I bet." Abby slid into the chair across from her, her voice calm but edged. "It was enlightening." Jenna blinked, feigning innocence. "Oh." Abby folded her hands on the table, steadying herself. "Kyle heard everything, Jenna. Every word you said in the kitchen." The smile faltered. "Abby, I don't." Abby cut in, her tone sharp enough to slice through the hum of holiday chatter around them. "You tried to sabotage my relationship. You set up that double date. You lied to me. and then you spent days planting doubts in my head. Jenna's expression hardened, the sweetness melting away. I was trying to help you. Help me? Abby laughed, bitter and low. By making me question the man I love? By hoping I'd fall for someone else? Jenna leaned back, arms crossed. You've been settling, Abby. Kyle's safe, sure, but he's not exciting. You deserve more. Abby stared at her, anger and clarity burning through the fog of guilt she'd carried since that night. No, Jenna. I deserve honesty. I deserve friends who want me happy. Not friends who want me single because they can't stand to see me in a healthy relationship. Jenna's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. Abby stood, pulling her coat around her. We're done, Jenna. I can't have someone in my life who roots for my failure. Jenna's voice followed her as she walked away, sharp and defensive. You'll regret this, Abby. Abby didn't look back. For the first time in weeks, her chest felt light. She stepped out into the cold, the city lights glittering like stars, and pulled out her phone. One message. To Kyle. Abby. Coffee later? Just us. No drama. I miss you. She hit send, a smile tugging at her lips. Jenna was behind her now, and ahead, something worth fighting for. Chapter 12. New Year's Getaway. The city was still glittering with leftover Christmas lights when Kyle pulled up in front of Abby's apartment. Snow crunched under his boots as he walked to the door, heart thudding like it had the first time he'd asked her out. She opened the door before he could knock, bundled in a navy coat, her smile soft but steady. You're early, she teased, her voice warm against the winter chill. Kyle grinned. Couldn't wait. They'd spent the last few days rebuilding. Slow texts, long calls, coffee dates that felt like first dates all over again. And now, for the first time since the storm, they were leaving the city behind. Kyle grabbed her bag, their fingers brushing, and for a moment, everything felt simple again. The drive to the lakeside inn was quiet in the best way. Music humming low, snow-dusted trees lining the road like sentinels. Abby leaned back in her seat, watching the world blur past, her hand resting on Kyle's arm. This place, she said softly as they pulled up to the inn, its windows glowing like lanterns against the dusk, is beautiful. Kyle smiled, his chest tightening. He'd chosen it for a reason. The inn sat on the edge of a frozen lake, its porch strung with golden lights, a fire pit crackling outside. It was the kind of place where time slowed down, where promises felt possible. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and cinnamon. Their room overlooked the lake, a picture-perfect view framed by frosted glass. Abby walked to the window, her breath catching. It's like a snow globe, she whispered. Kyle stepped behind her, sliding his arms around her waist. Happy New Year's Eve, he murmured against her hair. She turned, her smile lighting up the room. Happy New Year's Eve. Later, they sat by the fire pit, bundled in blankets, mugs of mulled wine warming their hands. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the sky. Kyle reached into his coat pocket, fingers brushing the small velvet box he'd carried for weeks. He wasn't ready, not tonight, not yet, but soon. Abby leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. You know, she said softly, this is the best New Year's I've ever had. Kyle kissed the top of her head, his heart steady for the first time in weeks. Me too. He didn't pull out the box. Not yet. But as fireworks bloomed in the distance, painting the snow in bursts of color, Kyle knew one thing for certain. The next time they came to a place like this, he wouldn't just be carrying a promise. He'd be ready to make it forever. Chapter 13. 1 year later, the cabin looked exactly as Kyle remembered. Stone fireplace, pine-scented air, strings of golden lights draped across the porch. Snow blanketed the hills in soft white, and the lake glittered under a pale winter sun. He stood at the edge of the porch, boots crunching against the frost, heart thudding like it had the first time he'd brought Abby here. Only this time, everything was different. Behind him, the door creaked open. Abby stepped out, bundled in a cream coat, her cheeks flushed from the warmth inside. Her smile was the same, bright, steady, but now it carried something deeper, something permanent. Kyle turned, his breath catching at the sight of her. Deja vu, he said softly. She laughed, the sound curling through the cold air like music. Except this time, no drama. No Jenna. Kyle grinned. Best upgrade ever. Abby walked to his side, slipping her gloved hand into his. The diamond on her finger caught the sunlight, scattering tiny sparks across the snow. It had happened 2 nights ago, under a canopy of Christmas lights and falling snow. Kyle had dropped to one knee, his voice shaking as he asked the question he'd been carrying for a year. Abby had said yes before he could finish the sentence. Now, as they stood on the porch where everything had nearly fallen apart, Kyle felt the weight of that memory, and the sweetness of what had come after. You know, Abby said, leaning against him, I still think about that storm, how awful it felt at the time, and how it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to us. Kyle kissed her temple, his voice low. Funny how life works like that. They stood there for a long moment, watching snowflakes drift lazily from the sky, the world hushed and perfect. Inside, the fire crackled, and the cabin glowed like a promise kept. Kyle tightened his arm around Abby, his chest warm despite the cold. Next year, he murmured, same place. Abby smiled, her eyes bright. Next year, and every year after. As the wind whispered through the pines and the first stars pricked the winter sky, Kyle knew one thing for certain. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about weathering the storms and finding your way back to each other when the snow finally clears.